Welcome back to Algebra, Chapter 1, Section 7, Rewriting Equations and Formulas. We are looking at some literal equations. An equation that has two or more variables is called a literal equation. So this right here is not a literal equation, it's an algebraic equation. We will solve this. I'll show you the traditional way that we solve it, right? We're solving for 2x, so we're going to eliminate the 6 from each side. Now, in this step, I'm not actually going to subtract it. I'm just going to write out that we're going to do 10 minus 6. Okay, usually we would just go ahead and do that in this step. But I'm going to solve, and then next step, I would divide by 2 on each side. Cancel out the 2. And then I'm left with x is equal to 10 minus 6 over 2. Now I can evaluate that because these are all numbers. I can do 10 minus 6 is 4 and divide by 2. However, the reason I showed you these steps like this is because that's exactly what we do if we have a literal equation. A literal equation that has two or more variables. If I want to solve this for length, for L, this is the perimeter, is 2 times L plus 2 times W, 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. If I want to solve that for L, I'm going to do the exact same steps. This is what I'm solving for, so I subtract what's outside of that circle, subtract 2w from each side. That cancels out the 2w on this side. I can't subtract these because they're unlike terms, so I'm just going to have p, I'm going to write that expression, minus 2w equals 2l. And now I want to divide by 2, same steps I was doing over here. Divide by 2 on each side. That cancels out the 2's, and then I have the length is perimeter minus 2w divided by 2. So now, anytime I know the perimeter and the width, I can easily find the length, because I've solved for L. All right, rewriting a literal equation. Solve the literal equation y equals 3x plus 5xz for x. Okay, they've told us we're solving for this variable, so we've got to get that by itself. All right, something we can do here, this is a little bit tricky, because x is being multiplied by 3, but here x is being multiplied by 5 and z. So I'm going to write that out again. We've got 3x, and then here we have 3x times z. So there's nothing I can subtract. I have to get that x out of there somehow. I can use reverse distributive property and divide both of these by x. Take x out of parentheses. It's called factoring out. I'm factoring out an x. And then I have this expression. If you can see, if I did distributive property to this, I'd get 3x and 5xz. So I'm doing reverse distributive property and pulling out a factor. Now x is being multiplied by this whole expression, so I'm going to divide the entire side by that expression, by 3 plus 5z. It's important that z doesn't make this here 0, because you can't divide by 0. So just pay attention to that. You can never divide by 0. So now we have x is equal to y over 3 plus 5z. All right, here we have the formula for the surface area, and they want us to solve it for the length. Okay, so we're solving for L. Now, in that formula, L is in this term, 2LW, and in the second term, 2LH, but not in the third term, 2WH. So I can subtract the third term from each side. So I'm going to subtract 2WH from each side because that doesn't have an L. 2WH. That cancels out. Now I have S minus 2WH is equal to, now I'm left with 2LW plus 2LH. So now I can use reverse distributive property, factor out the L times 2W plus 2H on this side still equals S minus 2WH. And now I'm going to divide by the entire set of parentheses on each side. So everything that's in there, W plus 2H, 2W plus 2H. That cancels out, so I have L is equal to S minus 2WH over 2W plus 2 times the height. There you go. Solved for L. All right. You own a rectangular lot that is 500 feet deep. It has an area of 10,000 square feet. To pay for a new water system, you are assessed $5.50 per foot of lot frontage. Frontage means what's at the front, at the road. Okay, so in this case, that's the width. Okay, the frontage. So find the frontage of your lot. How much are you assessed for the new water system? Okay, we've got the area that we know. Area of a rectangle is length times width. Okay, so now we're solving for W. So we divide by L on each side. L cancels out. W is the area divided by the length. So W is 100,000 square feet divided by 500. So that gives me a width of 200 feet. Now, we want to know how much are you assessed? Well, we're paying 200 per foot of frontage. The width is 200. That means the frontage is 200. So we're doing 200. We have 200 feet, and this is per foot, so times 5.5. And that gives us $1,100 that we have to pay for the frontage for the water system. All right, here are a few common formulas you should be familiar with. Temperature, 5/9 times F minus 32. That is Celsius and Fahrenheit, or Fahrenheit. Distance is rate times time. Okay, this is the distance traveled, rate, and time. Simple interest, I equals PRT. This is the one we're not quite as familiar with. Make sure you're taking notes. Interest. P is the principal, that's the money initially invested. R is the annual, that is per year, interest rate. In decimal form, very important that it's in decimals, not in percents. And then time in years, because it's the annual interest rate. All right, let's work with some of these. Okay, we want to solve this for F. Okay, so in order to do that, we multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction, so by 9/5 on each side. 9/5. That cancels out the 9, 9, 5, and 5, so we're left with 9/5 in Celsius is equal to Fahrenheit minus 32. Add 32 to each side, and Fahrenheit is equal to 9/5 Celsius plus 32. All right, we want to use interest formula here. Deposit 5,000, okay, that's our principal, into an account that earns simple interest. After 6 months, our time, but careful, we'll note something there with this time, the account earns $162.50 in interest. What is the annual interest rate? Okay, 6 months. Is that a year? Is that 6 years? Do we just put 6 in here for time? No, careful. Months, this is 0.5 of a year. So that's 6 over 12. Anytime you have months, that means put it over 12. All right, so we know that the interest is 162. We want to solve for the interest rate, so we're solving for R, which means we divide by P and T on each side. So our rate, R, is the interest divided by the principal times the time. So R is equal to the interest earned, 162.50 over 5,000 times the time, and that is 0.5. Okay, and we type that puppy in, and that is 0.065, which, if we want this in percents, we move it over 2 places, 6.5%. All right, always make sure your answer is reasonable. Okay, solving a real-life problem with a truck driver. Averages 60 miles per hour while delivering freight to a customer. On the return trip, the driver averages 50 miles per hour. Due to construction, the total driving time is 6 hours. How long does the trip take? Okay, so we're looking for time. We're going to solve for time, so divide by r on each side. Time is distance divided by the rate. Now, we have travel time there and travel time back. So the rate is 60 miles per hour. We don't know the distance, but we do know the total travel time. Okay, so we know that the time is 6.6 hours. 0.6 hours is equal to, and our distance traveling there plus our distance traveling back. Okay, distance over the rate of 60 traveling there, distance traveling back together takes us 6.6. So we find a common denominator. We have to multiply this by 5 and this by 6, and we get 300. So then we get 5d over 300 plus 6d over 300. All right, so we get 11d over 300. Now we can solve for the distance, multiply each side by 300 and divide by 11. So times 300 is 1980, times 300 cancels out, is 11d. Divide by 11 on each side, and d is equal to 180. Now careful, at this point you'll be feeling pretty good about yourself because you got the distance, but that was not the question. It was how long does each trip take? So we figure out the trip there was 60 miles per hour, so the time for that is 180 divided by 60 miles per hour. So the travel time there was 3 hours. And then the time coming back is 180 divided by 50. So the time coming back is 3.6 hours. And now we have answered that question. That is all we have for today. You have learned to rewrite equations and formulas, looking at literal equations and a few common formulas. See you next time.